everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Well, friends, I don't know about you. Well, actually, I sort of do know. We love Halloween. And Halloween has officially begun. At least right here on this channel it has. With so many spooky and unsettling Halloween stories to fill our nights, I started thinking, what are we waiting for? We can't just save them all for Halloween night itself. And don't worry, we'll do that too. But we're gonna start them right now. Ghosts, creeps, and downright scary. Let's enjoy them all here tonight. Before we do, a special shout out to J Nightmares, who provided the last story of the night. You won't want to miss it. So, let's get started, shall we? I'm a 43-year-old female, and Halloween is always a hard time for me. But this year has been even worse than usual. So hey, maybe talking about it will help, right? Yeah, don't worry, I'm not holding my breath, but here goes nothing. Growing up in the 80s, I was privileged enough to experience true trick-or-treating. For the first 10 years of my life, I was out there beating pavement with my giant pillowcase until the last porch went dark. I remember the magic just fine. However, I was also unfortunate enough to experience why it's not a thing anymore. At age 11, I couldn't decide between my 3 favorite costumes, so I combined them all to become a fairy princess ballerina, and let me tell you, I thought I was hot shit. I mean, I was fully immersed in the fantasy. As always, I started out in a large group of kids, but as the night wore on, they all went home, one by one, until it was just me. I could still see a handful of illuminated porch lights and was determined to at least finish out the street before quitting. Apparently, they were all waiting on me, too, because they were each turned off as I left. At least until I got to the last house. That one was turned off as the door opened. The inside lights were bright enough for the owner and I to comfortably see each other, but not bright enough to spotlight us for the neighbors. He pretended it was an accident, like he hit the wrong switch, and began loudly flipping one back and forth with no effect. The trick is obvious when looking back. Clearly, he only had to flip the wrong switch, but at the time, I was just a greedy kid who wanted one more handful of candy. I stood bouncing from one foot to another, not caring about the lights in the slightest. Then he said something to the effect of it being his bad luck for the bulb to blow out when he was trying to see the prettiest costume of the night, and I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Finally, someone who appreciated my ingenuity and my beauty. It felt so genuine, so natural, when he remembered leaving the candy in the kitchen and invited me inside. After all, it's not safe to be out alone so late. And this way, he would be able to give my costume the appreciation it deserved. I know I was only 11, but I have a really hard time letting go of how many red flags I just didn't see. I should have known to run the second the light went off, but I never suspected a thing. I was like a fatted calf wandering into a slaughterhouse. Once inside, he complimented my outfit a few more times before scampering off to the kitchen. After a few seconds, he called back something to the effect of knowing the candy was right around there somewhere, and annoyed, I began digging through my own candy to kill time. The next thing I knew, the man was back with a tall glass of chocolate milk and Reese's peanut butter cups. He was sorry for the wait, but a fairy princess ballerina deserved only the best. In fact, he had a few Snicker bars in his office he could grab while I drank my milk. I thought it was my luckiest Halloween score ever. He returned with the extra candy right around the time I finished off my milk, and I couldn't wait to dump my haul onto the center of my bed. The man walked me back to his front door, opened it slightly, and commented on how dark it was with everyone's lights off. He hoped I didn't live too far away, but wouldn't mind driving me home if I did, just to be safe. Well, now that he mentioned it, I was feeling rather exhausted from all the walking, and I had come a pretty long way. I'll never forget his creepy smile when I agreed. I was relieved that he truly didn't mind. I didn't want to be an inconvenience after he'd been so kind to me. Then he shut the door and said that he was going to grab his keys and a coat. I waited, feeling more and more tired by the second, until I could no longer stand. I remember thinking it was strange that I was suddenly so sleepy when I usually stayed up much later, but my mind was foggy, and it was difficult to stick with one train of thought. Eventually, I sank to the floor, too tired to stand, and the world went dark. After that, I remember nothing until waking up in the hospital. I was wearing one of those ugly gowns and my costume. The wings, clearly bent and broken, were sitting in a plastic bag on a nearby table. A nurse noticed my eyes open and called for my parents and a doctor. Physically, I was okay enough to go home a few hours later, and I eventually made a full recovery. The only reason I survived that night was thanks to the last friend I was with. When I didn't return home by 10, my mom began calling all of my friends. Jamie was the last one to see me, and thankfully remembered which street we parted on, the one with the handful of lights still glowing. The police went door to door with my picture, and they were pointed to the right direction by an older woman who remembered my attacker's light also being on at the time. Thankfully, this was the 80s, and we were in a small town, so things were done a little less officially back then. My parents and uncles were also tailing the police, conducting their own investigation. My dad said as soon as he saw the guy, all of his instincts began screaming that I was in that house. He shoved straight past the man and started running room to room. The police tried to stop him, but my uncles got in the way. Then, my dad found me unconscious in the back of a closet. The whole neighborhood was gathered outside by that point, and they all wanted a piece of him. He had to make a full confession and go with the police for his own protection. That was the last year I ever went trick-or-treating. I always knew it would be safe if I stayed with friends and practiced a modicum of caution, but I'd lost all interest. Instead, I became one of those people who prefers staying home to watch scary movie marathons. So yeah, that's my Halloween story. Halloween night, freshman year, my friends and I discovered an old graveyard hidden in the backyard of an abandoned house. We'd actually discovered it the night before Halloween, but all agreed to come back Halloween night with more people. After we all finished up doing family stuff like taking various siblings trick-or-treating, we all met up at our friend Corey's house and prepared for the walk over there. The house sat on a dead-end road, about a 6-minute walk from Corey's house. The thing is, since the house sat where it did, none of us had really ever passed it before. The only reason we ended up there the night before was because of our friend Justin's dog. He'd booked it away from us and run directly into the backyard of the home, like we watched him dart away from Justin and beeline it for the back of the house. Justin was the first to run off, but eventually we joined him because we had to get the dog. Pretty sure none of us knew what the deal was with the house at first. I'd always assumed it was occupied because occasionally I'd see this older style car parked in the driveway, sort of a yellow color. I'd never seen it up close. The car, but also the house. And as we approached the house, it appeared unkept. It looked as though someone had started to take care of it and gave up halfway through, and it looked like that had been a long time ago. The more I looked at the house, the more I was sure no one was living here. While Justin retrieved his dog, Corey and I started talking about the fact that we didn't think anyone lived here, all while we were peeping inside the windows trying to confirm our suspicions. We were interrupted by the sound of Justin. He was yelling for us to come check out the backyard, that he'd found something. As we head around the house, we see Justin standing, looking down, while his dog sits patiently next to him. Corey and I ask him what's so important, what did he find? but he just waves us over, saying we have to see it. So we walked over. We approached and followed our friend's gaze. Half buried by the ground itself, there are 3 gravestones, equal in size and disposition. They appeared to be made of stone. There were also what we presumed to be names and dates inscribed on them, but we couldn't read them. Not really. As far as we could tell, they all shared a similar last name. But other than starting with L, we had no idea. We putzed around the yard for a while looking for anything else cool. Interestingly enough, the patch of gravestones appeared to be the only area not completely overgrown by weeds, sort of like someone had cleared them, but who? The home was empty. You could see that clearly through the windows from the backyard. I assumed it was the person who drove the fancy car, but I had no idea who was really taking care of this little graveyard. It was around this time that Justin recommended we come back the following night for Halloween. We invited our girlfriends, our other friend Scott, and told him to bring whoever. Again, we all met at Corey's, and once the larger group was there, we made our way to the abandoned house. As we made our way down the dead-end road, we were all being loud, obnoxious teens. Corey's girlfriend, Cora, asks, "Did you guys see that?" while pointing down the road towards the house. Personally, I see nothing, but I hear Scott say, "Yeah, I see it. That lady." Still, I see nothing. Then they both start cracking up. The rest of us follow, realizing that they were trying to trick us or whatever. We continued on and found ourselves in the backyard of the home. It was a lot darker this time, but we came prepared. Most of us had our flashlights out or were working to get them out, while my girlfriend, Carissa, just stood there, sort of frozen, looking at the gravestones in the dark. I walked over with my flashlight and shined it on the gravestones. I said something like, "Crazy, right? This has just been here the whole time and we never knew?" I was expecting her to respond, but when I looked over, she was crying. Hyper-focused and not fully equipped to handle what exactly was going on there, I silently waved my friends over. I asked her, "What's wrong, Car? Why are you crying?" Again, she didn't say anything, just turned to the side and hugged me. Hugging her back, my friends who have now arrived are giving me looks like, what the fuck is going on? I make a face to show them I really don't know what's going on. Cora steps in asking the same thing. This time, Carissa turns to face everyone and apologizes profusely, saying she has no idea what came over her, but she felt a connection with the children buried here. "I think something bad happened to them," she said after a moment of silence. "Something bad? Like what? Wait, how do you know these are kid graves?" This time it was Corey asking the questions. Carissa tells us that she doesn't even know how she knows. Just that she was drawn to the gravestones, despite not really knowing exactly where they were. She said once she ended up in front of them, she felt the spirits of 2 young children, almost as though they were standing right next to her. "Like, you could see them?" Scott asked, almost in a joking manner. "No, I didn't see anything, and I'm not kidding around," Carissa insisted. She continued on, telling us that the children seemed sad. She likened it to the way that she felt as a child when she had to move away from all of her friends and family after her dad died, the deepest sadness a child could experience. And she was feeling it from these 2 children. They didn't say anything out loud, but they spoke to her. She could hear them talking to her, but inside her head, she could only make out a few words. "Gone. Mommy's here. Where's Daddy?" She said she heard them crying. Scott laughs and everyone shoots him a look at the same time. Carissa tells me that she wants to go home, and as much as I want to be there for her, I'm super bummed at the prospect of ending the night before it even started. I grab my things just as Cora and the other girls surround Carissa, asking her questions, trying to convince her to stay. Meanwhile, I'm telling Scott that if I have to leave, it's definitely on him, and he needs to apologize to Carr before it's too late. He walks over and I follow behind because I need to make sure that he doesn't say some bullshit apology. Carissa emerges from the group of girls, and before Scott can say a word, she says that she's staying. I am elated and happy and don't bother asking what changed her mind because I was just glad she was going to be staying. She said that she and the girls prayed for the kids and their mom and asked if it was okay to stay. She got confirmation, so all was good. Okay, great. Honestly, I didn't believe any of it, really. God, I know, I'm sorry. It's just I was a hardcore skeptic, and Carissa was really into spooky stuff and messing around, so initially I thought she was probably just pulling a prank on us. Then I started to think, dang, she's a really good actress. But I knew from experience that she wasn't a great liar, so I decided to appear as though I believed as much as necessary to be supportive, and I guess part of me did a little. We had a few joints and planned on seeing if we could safely make our way inside the house to smoke them. To our surprise, the back door was completely unlocked, and once inside, we could see that the front door was too. If someone lived here, they sure hadn't done anything with the place or cared much to keep it safe from reckless teens like me and my friends. We decided to sit in front of the fireplace, putting some of our flashlights inside of it to mimic the firelight. Just as we were about to spark the first joint, we heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Instantly, we all quieted down even more than we already had in anticipation for the joint. We were silent now. We all looked at each other rapidly, but we said nothing. I was personally thinking we needed to make an incredibly quick exit before whoever was upstairs came downstairs. Then, the footsteps were joined by more footsteps. Holy shit, there were multiple people here, I thought to myself. Cora starts to speak in hushed tones. Guys, I cannot get in trouble with the cops or whatever. My parents think I'm at Carissa's. They can't even know I'm with Corey. She starts to say more, but Corey puts his hand over her mouth, telling her to shh. Suddenly, footsteps, several of them, could be heard barreling down the stairs. All of us stood up and got ready to make a run for the back door. Cora and Corey were out the door first, but the rest of us stood there frozen, waiting to face our fate. After a moment, Scott is the first one to move, going straight for the stairs. What the fuck, dude? There's no one here. He sounds both disappointed and confused. Carissa and I walked over to where Scott was while the other two girls decided to leave. We see that there's no one on the stairs, or anywhere for that matter. Carissa walks over to the stairs, and when she does, we can hear footsteps above us once again. She says to us, "Let's go up there." She's excited, but suddenly I'm feeling a bit more freaked out, like really freaked out. These footsteps above us were likely people, and I didn't want to run into them. So I told her I didn't think that it was a good idea. She pleads a little, saying that she bets no one is up there, that she's so sure she bets us $20 each that we won't find a single person. Still, I'm not willing to risk it, but apparently Scott is. "Deal," he shouts before running up the stairs full speed, all while screaming, "Come on out, motherfuckers, joke's over." Carissa and I share a laugh, mine more nervous than hers, but then she follows Scott, and I'm left standing alone downstairs. Not for long. I couldn't handle being alone down there. I rushed upstairs. We spend a few minutes going from room to room, Carissa moving more slowly than Scott and me even slower than her. Surely someone was up here, right? Every door, every closet, every piece of leftover debris, all to discover we were completely alone. We heard our friends downstairs. They'd made their way back inside and were wondering where we were. We told them to come upstairs, but just at that same time, Scott rushes out of a room. He doesn't look like he's feeling it anymore. I watched his demeanor change, and it felt like he was confused. "Were you just in that room?" He looks at me and points to the room that he just came out of. I look at him and I ask, "Huh? How would that work, dude? I'm right here, in this room. He knows I'm right, shakes his head like he doesn't know why he asked that. Where's your little girlfriend? He sounds a little agitated, so I ask, dude, what's up with you? Car's right inside the room I just came out of. Carissa steps out of the room and joins us in the hallway. They make eye contact for a split second before Scott runs down the stairs. He ran downstairs and decided that he was actually going to leave, and he did. He just left that night completely scared out of his wits, didn't say a word. Carissa shouted after him something about $20, but he was gone, and she was laughing. She grabbed my hand and said, "Come on," leading me back down the stairs. She asks me what's wrong, and I guess it was the first time I realized maybe my outsides matched my insides a bit. I told her, I don't know. That was all really weird, right? Like, what were those footsteps? Then everyone was around us asking what's up with Scott and did we find anything. I apparently had lost words, so Carissa gave her version, saying that we confirmed there was no one upstairs, so the footsteps we heard belonged to the children. She said she knew their spirits were connected to the house because they kept saying home. She said that there was more that she wanted to tell us, but Scott really pissed her off. She felt like no one believed her, especially Scott, and just wanted him to experience it for himself. She wasn't wrong. Even still, I have a hard time believing it, at least that it happened to me. I do believe her, though, still. And I did for sure the moment I saw that the house was empty. It's just still unbelievable. I dated Carissa most of that year, but she broke up with me and started dating someone arguably cooler than me shortly after. I think she was probably too good for me and all of our friends anyway. Maybe she didn't ever act that way or think that, but I always knew that she was special, if that makes sense. I guess I just never realized that meant communicating with the other side type of special. So what happened to Scott? Well, Scott said that when he was looking for someone upstairs, he saw someone close the closet door in one of the bedrooms. He really thought that it was one of us messing with him, until he saw both of us in the hallway. My friend Justin said that he knew Carissa was telling the truth the whole time. He said he knew something was strange or active about that place just by the way his dog ran off that day. He told us we didn't know his dog like he did, that he wasn't a run-off anywhere kind of dog, not unless there was some sort of purpose, like he was being called by someone. My dad was granted custody of me over my mom when I was in second grade, after she was involved in a DUI accident. She was at fault and was required to serve a 2-year sentence, so for at least 2 years I'd be living with my dad full-time in New Hampshire. This was upsetting in itself, but the worst came before I even moved there. My dad would make me give my dog to the shelter. His new girlfriend, Monique, didn't like dogs. And just like that, my dog, Frankie, was gone. That dog was my best friend. Elementary school wasn't easy, but Frankie would always be there waiting for me to get off the bus and cheer me up. When I'd cry in my room from the trivial adolescent challenges life threw at me, Frankie would lay in my room with me. He wouldn't beg for pets or attention. He'd just lay with me. He was everything a lonely little girl needed, and will always be the goodest boy I ever had. Goes without saying, I didn't have a great first impression of Monique, and it only got worse. At my dad's house, my new room was Monique's extra bedroom with her extra closet, so her resentment for me only began there. Maybe it was because I was a reminder that my dad had a life before theirs. Maybe she just plain disdained children. Whatever it was, Monique hated my presence there. She was nasty, and would always try to get my dad to side with her over me, even with the little things like dinner. If I wanted Italian, she wanted Mexican. If I wanted Mexican, she wanted pizza. Then the bigger things like guilt-tripping my dad about spending time with me on my birthday, which happens to be the day before Valentine's Day, not Valentine's Day. She spoiled the evening with her complaining, and eventually we left the arcade, picked up some random food on the way home, and I was told to essentially go to my room. The thing is, this wasn't the first time that she did this. It was every time I spent time with my dad. This one just really sucked because it was my birthday. Although I could most certainly let this run into a rant about how Monique was just terrible, I will keep it short by wrapping her up in 3 words: selfish, petty, insensitive. As far from a mother figure as you could be, she made sure that I knew that she wasn't my mother, and she didn't want anything to do with being my parent. When my dad was around, it was, "Oh, you know, I'm just no good with kids, babe," or something along those lines. All while she was sitting there reminding me of that dog I had, asking whatever happened to it. That one hurt. Sleeping one night, movement under my bed would wake me up. No, I was awake, laying with my eyes staring at the ceiling. I laid there until I felt the bed slowly lift and drop from the foot of the bed to the head like a wave. When I felt the mass directly underneath me, I couldn't help but scramble out of bed and run out of the room, down the stairs and into the living room. They were watching a movie when I interrupted in a terrified leap through the hallway door. Monique spilled the bowl of popcorn, reacting to the burst of noise. My dad's telling me to calm down as Monique's screaming that I almost gave her a heart attack. I try to tell them how it felt like something was crawling beneath me. I try to tell them about my bed moving. But Monique tells me I had a nightmare and need to stop being a brat. She called me a brat, and my dad didn't defend me. I ran back upstairs before anyone could see the tears welling up in my eyes. Back in my room, I figured I'd rather be eaten by whatever's crawling under my bed than see the upturned lip of Monique's grossed out face looking at me. Unfortunately, her disbelief didn't make it any less real for me. I decided this was real, and so the next incident happened soon after. Monique walks into the kitchen one night, and when she turns on the light, she sees that all the cupboard doors have been opened. Not one was missed. This makes her storm into my room and start yelling at me, accusing me that I did all of it, but I was sleeping. Finally, my dad walked into the room and told Monique to lay off. He escorts her out of the room while she proceeds to spew audacious comments at me. It was hard to fall back asleep after that. The sudden jolt got my adrenaline going, and I could still hear them continuing to quietly fight in their bedroom. Monique's birthday was about 2 months after I moved in. She told me that I was the early birthday present she didn't ask for. What she really wanted for her special day was a real gold Rolex. My dad made decent money working at his job, but not gold Rolex money. But apparently the man saved and saved, or opened up another credit card because lo and behold, Monique got a real gold Rolex for her birthday. That item alone brought a slew of problems. She would blame me every time the watch would get misplaced, never missing. She would take it off to take a shower, and it wouldn't be in the bathroom when she got out. Instead, it would be on the floor just outside the door, or sitting on the bed. Their fighting would steadily escalate, and as their tensions grew, so did the energy in the house. Monique started to believe the happenings to be evil spirits, but still found a way to blame it on me, saying these evil things weren't happening before I moved in. It all came to a head on Halloween night. My dad took me to go trick-or-treating early, sun still shining, right after school. He said it was to get the good houses with the big candy bars first, before the other trick-or-treaters do. I didn't complain, but I felt silly knocking on doors just as people were getting off of work and plugging in their decorations. When we got back home, Monique was all done up. Her and my dad were going to a work party after trick-or-treating. They were practically out the door before I got out of my costume. After they left, I gave candy to trick-or-treaters as they'd show up. Eventually, I started eating the candy and decided to turn off the lights and watch some Are You Afraid of the Dark as I dozed off on the couch. When I was woken up again, it was by Monique and my dad getting home. My dad drove and he was exhausted, walking straight back to the bedroom. Monique was still drunk and wanted to continue the party for a little longer. After I was told to go to bed, I heard the TV turn back on and a late-night talk show fill up the quiet living room. Soon, though, Monique's snoring would be louder than the TV. And that's when it all went south. While I thought Monique was fully asleep, I crept out of my bed and tiptoed into the kitchen. I'd gotten very good at moving around like a ninja, but Monique pulled some adult reverse psychology. She was awake the whole time, fake snoring and all. Right when I crawled on the countertop and started opening a cupboard, I hear Monique shout, "I caught you, you little bitch." It made me jump, and by the time I'm reaching, she's already in the kitchen grabbing my legs and dragging me off the counter, tossing me to the ground. The landing knocks the wind out of me. Monique stands over me and starts calling me all of the names in the book. I must have hit the floor with a thud loud enough to wake my dad up, because before I knew it, he was in the kitchen, pulling Monique off of me. She was too drunk to clearly retell what had just happened. She also caught me before the other cupboards were opened. When the wind got back into my lungs, I started screaming and crying that I was just getting a glass of water. Monique was seeing so much red, all she could do was call me a liar and try to come after me again. That's when my dad had enough. He grabbed her, told her to grab her shit. Then he called a taxi that she had to wait for outside. And that was the last time I ever saw Monique. Thing is, Monique was right about everything. It was me doing all of the stuff around the house, faking the monster under my bed, misplacing her watch, opening the cupboards. All me, 100%. Still, 42 years later, I've never had the urge to seek revenge like I did on that woman. I'm not proud of what transpired, but Monique and I were never going to get along. I just pushed the hands of our clock to the inevitable ending that we would share together. Frankensteins, Draculas, zombies, mummies, and many more were all on the dance floor. The whole club was full of monsters. Tonight, it's Halloween. One of my friends asked me to come out and go clubbing with her. Everyone was dressed in costume. The music was blasting out of the speakers. Everyone was enjoying themselves in the festivities of the night. It was really weird to see all these creeps and ghouls flirting and dancing. I came to the club dressed as a witch, but since I'm quite a shy person, I was spending most of the night against the wall, sipping on my drink and watching my friends dance. Just as I was regretting my decision to come, a guy in a costume approached me. He came as the Grim Reaper. He wore a jet black hooded robe. Out of the darkness of his costume, I saw his bony white skull mask. It stood out like the moon in the night sky. The Grim Reaper grabbed my hand. It was icy cold to the touch. He pulled my hand as if to escort me. Since I was alone and curious, I followed. It was more exciting than standing alone all night. We weaved in and out of the people dancing on the dance floor. At that moment, someone grabbed my other hand and shouted into my ear, "Don't go." I spun around to see who it was, and as I did, whoever it was let go of my hand and disappeared into the dance floor. The Grim Reaper guy let go of my hand too. I didn't realize how cold it was until he let go. I looked for him, but I couldn't see him anywhere. The next morning, it was reported in the news that some residents nearby had found Halloween costumes strewn around the neighborhood. Were these the costumes of the people who followed the Grim Reaper outside? I don't know what happened to those people, but I'm sure I wouldn't be around today if I'd followed him outside. Who was the person who stopped me? Who was the Grim Reaper? What happened to those people? I have a lot of unanswered questions. Thinking about it still gives me the chills. Well, friends, that's gonna do it for tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me, whether it's your first time or you're a regular. Your support means the world over here, so thanks for listening. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough to find those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of my patrons, whom I appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.